be true to your word and have integrity. Your word is sometimes all you got. And if you start to mess with that and you start to show people around you that you actually cannot be counted on, the things that come out of your mouth don't really mean anything, you are going to immediately change the nature of those relationships.
What do I need to know about you and your past to
Yeah.
understand where you are today?
I think one thing you need to know about my past to understand where I am today is that I'm open to evolution, and I'm open to seeing how my personality and the way that I go after things has evolved. When I think about the beginning of my career, I was incredibly persistent. And in New York, that is one of the pulses of New York City is persistence, and you have to get on that wave of being very go-getter and going after what it is that you want. But that has really changed. I'm not quite as extroverted as I used to be. I'm not quite as driven in that same way. So when I talk about kind of the earlier parts of my career, for sure, you'll see this through line of being very persistent and really kind of going after things. That has evolved and changed, and sometimes I miss that old version.
Perfect segue into your career. Tell me about your journey.
Yeah. So I started my journey, and this is also something that I'd love to share with kind of the younger generation, is it's okay to not have everything figured out in your 20s. It's okay to not have this whole picture planned, because life throws you curveballs and life throws you things that then you have to be able to adapt. So the way that I started my career was actually in the entertainment industry, which is not the industry that I'm in now. So there have been quite a few turns in the road, but I started wanting to be a documentary filmmaker when I graduated from college. And I was very fortunate to get a job at MTV through a connection, through a family friend, and kind of I got an internship first in college. And then again, here's that persistence, kind of staying in touch with the people there who could impact whether I was, hired or not. And then the timing that I have no control over also played a part in that. I managed to get a great job there because someone's assistant had given notice and was leaving. So it just happened to be timing. So I started as the assistant to the head of news and docs at MTV. And at that time, that comprised shows like MTV Cribs, My Super Sweet 16, Diary, Pimp My Ride. So if anyone's familiar with any of those.
Pimp My Ride.
Right? Right?
I love that show.
Yeah. Right? And what about Cribs? Were you a Cribs watcher?
Oh yeah. That was so cool.
I love that show too. I wish they had it. I don't even know if they have it anymore. But anyway, so she was the head of all of those things. So immediately kind of getting thrown into this entertainment industry right in the middle of Times Square. MTV was it back then. There was no TikTok. There was no Instagram. There was no Facebook. There was no other. MTV was the cultural kind of, phenomenon of dictating culture and influencing culture. And really being so having that experience to be in a company at that age where I'm the target demographic and I'm working at this company that is really celebrating youth and encouraging opinions. And I was very fortunate with who my bosses were. And I highlight from my whole career there was I was part of the team that launched MTV's first bicultural, bilingual Latino channel for US Hispanics. And so I was part of a very small team that was really given a big task to kind of put this on the map and get this going. And so to this day, that's a huge career highlight because that's part of my heritage. And I got to work with people who we all spoke Spanish and English and mixed the language and were feeling this particular passion that was very personal, right? About this company and this new channel and this new network, right? So that is a big career highlight. And then because I listened to some mentors, I went to NBC Universal after about 7 years at MTV. My mentors kind of said to me, I think you should try something new and see, what this is about. So I was working in something called strategic marketing. So that's where you are this linchpin between sales, which is what's making the company money. That's what's paying all of our salaries, quite frankly. And then production. So these people that are these creative and who are coming up with the shows and who are coming up with the casting and who are designing and creating. And so my role is to be this almost mediator between these two very charged, I would say, personality types. You've got this kind of hustle, bottom line, we're making the money energy. And then you have this very creative, like, let me do my art, personality. And so it's a very delicate dance in that role because you're trying to ensure that we have clients that are interested in our programming. And they do influence the programming. Who your advertisers are and who's paying money does have an impact in what is being created. And so it's this fascinating relationship that kind of I got to have a front row seat to that and really be a part of that. And then when I left New York and I moved to California, then that's when my career really changed. I started to have interviews and I really didn't like what I was seeing in the entertainment culture, I would say, as a woman, especially. I had interviews with some studios and things like that, and I just felt uncomfortable. And I don't really know how to explain it beyond there was some kind of intuition that I listened to. And so I was out of work. I've been out of work multiple times in my career, but that was the first time. And it was very humbling while I was trying to figure out what it was that I was going to do next. And that's when my career took the huge turn that kind of has taken me to where I am today, kind of leaving this entertainment field, but still working in things that are very creative. It just looked different. And I think it took me a little while to figure out that, wow, I am still being really creative, even though this career now looks different. So I started a whole new career working in this company whose goal was to really advance the career of women and get more women on corporate boards. And so it was a startup and I helped build the company. So now we're back to this. This is now my second startup experience. And having that opportunity to wear so many hats and really challenge yourself with all the different ways that your strengths can show up. And I can only see that now in retrospect, like having that retrospective look. I don't think I could see that at the time because I was just kind of so in it and just trying to build this business and kind of have this impact. But now that I look back, I can see that. I can see how a lot of my strengths that I didn't even know were there were brought out and were nurtured, by my boss. So I was very fortunate. And then that turned into this whole learning and development career that I'm in now, which involves coaching, which involves tons of training and creating trainings that have all different kinds of impact to corporate culture. So that training could be anything from, a diversity, equity, and inclusion type of training, or it could be having difficult conversations. Another one could be about boundaries. How do you have boundaries at work? How do you preserve your energy? How does time management factor in? So the way that I get to be creative with those things is really depends on the client that I'm working for and depends on the company that I'm working for and how much leeway they give me. And those are my favorite projects, are the ones that they let me really kind of vibe and flow with the content and kind of figure out, well, how do I want this experience to be with this captive audience that's either being forced to attend, let's be honest, they're being forced to go, or they want to go. And so I have these, so you can see the parallels to like making a film or making a documentary or something like that, kind of what I wanted to do in the beginning of my career, because it's real humans having an experience in community together. And you as a facilitator and as an instructional designer have to make that compelling and have to make people pay attention and have to make people want to engage and pay attention. So I start to get my wheels turning of like, okay, let me learn about this audience in particular and how I can make something that is going to entice and know that I'm there for them as a facilitator. I'm not trying to shove content down your throat. I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
have this great experience, and I'm going to, on the fly, because I have the experience now, on the fly, I can tweak and I can adjust based on what I'm even seeing in the room. So I think that's really fun. That part is super fun and kind of adrenaline. Your adrenaline's going when you're in the room and you're presenting and you're really, you can't control what anyone's going to say. You can't control anyone's reactions
Mm.
or their responses. And so it can be humbling. It can be challenging. It's and it's very exhausting also. When I'm done facilitating a thing, I just like want to put on pajamas and like collapse on my
Wow.
on my couch. So there's like kind of a snapshot about kind of how my career has changed.
I'm curious on that last part with facilitating an
Yeah.
environment that makes training well effective,
Yeah.
fun, but also
Yep.
how do you do that? I see how it is different every time, but are there
Sure.
certain approaches that you found really work with that?
Yeah. So one of the things that I'll start with something that I'm new to figuring out, and then I'll
Mm.
tell you about something that I'm kind of more experienced with. So that's
Yeah.
something that I learned in graduate school, and one of my last courses that I'm taking was really thinking about everything from where is the training being held. I never thought about that. I never thought about the
Mm.
conference room or the room, and is it accessible, and do people feel even comfortable being themselves in this room? Does this room get used for other things that people have a negative connotation with? How can I make people feel welcome in the environment that we are entering? And so you have to think about that when you do virtual training. So a conversation just like this, except it's a lot more people on here, and or it's something where it's in person. So I think about everything from, now I'm thinking about everything from what am I wearing, and what messages is that conveying to the diversity in the audience, and how can I be that chief, room officer, chief environmental officer of creating this environment? And that's not something I had thought of. I just kind of took it for granted. Oh, we're in this room and this is what it is. Or
Mm.
so now I'm really trying to be deliberate about that. The thing that I have more experience with now, and the thing that scares, I think, a lot of very junior facilitators and presenters is, what if I get somebody in the audience who's just like a jerk?
Mm.
And who really doesn't want to be there and is very resentful that he or she has to be there, and is gonna try to make this difficult. And what I have noticed about that is people can come in with that attitude, but if I, again, am the chief environmental officer, I'm setting the ground rules, I am showing you what I expect
Mm.
from every single person, and I'm getting their buy-in at the very beginning. So I don't
Mm.
start any kind of training. I don't just go right into anything. I'm very much about, why are we even here? Why are we even here today? What am I going to promise you that you're going to leave with today if you choose to buy in and participate?
Mm.
Can't promise you anything if you're just going to sit there passively,
Mm.
right? So you get to control how you experience this today and what you're going to take away from this. And so that's the huge difference between training and teaching adults and training and teaching children or young people. Is adults want to use their lives. They want to use all the talents and all the experience that they have. They don't want to be treated as a blank slate, because they're not. And so it's having that respect, and it's me demonstrating that I'm respecting everyone in the room, that I've noticed has shifted those people. I can tell very early kind of who are my
Mm.
challengers, if you will, and having that attitude will it softens that energy.
It sounds
Yeah.
really mindful to me. Sounds like you're really
Mm-hmm.
perceptive.
Having that skill is very useful in this line of work.
Yeah.
I did something called Strength Finders. Have you ever heard of Strength
Yeah.
Finders?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation. I love it. But I have a few specific strengths that I kind of now look at what I do for a living and I'm like, this is a complete match, right?
Wow.
So empathy is one of my big ones, one of my
Okay.
top fives. Also individualization or individuation. I'm not saying it right, but it's being able to see everybody as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
And then another one is activator, I think it is. So it's having that energy to kind of start something and kind of bring that enthusiasm to kind of the beginning of a project or something like that. So I think a couple of those things really play into why I feel successful and kind of confident in what I do. Of course, like anyone else, I have imposter syndrome all the time. Of kind of like, wait, am I valuing my time enough in terms of like a pricing perspective as a consultant? So I'm reaching out to a professor of mine to actually have like that vulnerable conversation of going, because she consults also.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, I don't know how am I valuing myself the right way? What are your thoughts on kind of my fee structure of like how I'm a consultant and how I do this? So that's been kind of interesting to notice that and be like, yeah, I'm not confident in that area. And that I don't want to send that message to myself that I'm not valuing my time in the right way. So we'll see what happens with that.
It sounds like having somebody, having another person having another relationship to be vulnerable. And
Yeah.
sounds like that's incredibly helpful in working through some of the stuff that you're
Yeah.
feeling yourself. Are there when that person's not there, have you found there's any questions that you found really helpful to ask yourself?
I'm still learning how to have good, healthy, I would say, responses to my own activators or my own triggers or my own stress points, right? How can I have a healthier relationship with those things and respond in a way that is kind of connecting my mind and body and spirit? A lot of times I think, and this is a lot of work I've been doing personally, is kind of about embodiment. And our Western culture is all about I think therefore I am. And so it's really celebrating the mind and celebrating the brain, and our body is just something we're lugging around. And I've been really working on the opposite and understanding and wanting all of that to be integrated, and changing it to I am a body in this world and therefore I am. So sometimes I think getting away from the thoughts. So it's funny that you asked that, because it's like almost almost an opposite answer. It's like getting away from up here, and going into something physical, like going into the swimming pool and swimming, doing exercising. Even I actually I love crying. I think it's an amazing release. It's a way to complete the stress response. I learned that this year. It's a way our body processes things, right? So having a good cry is great. I highly recommend it, but we can't all do that. I understand we don't all have that access point. So I think my recommendation is, if anyone's struggling with that, is kind of like finding your physical access point. Is that going to be exercise? Is that going to be just being in nature and taking a walk? Is that going to be what does that look like? Going to a rock climbing gym and trying to rock climb. There's all these different access points, and I think that's what makes us healthier and able to kind of deal with stressors and triggers in our lives.
Listening to you, I noticed that labeling, finding labels for certain, like access points. So I think having the language to think through yourself and having the infrastructure in the form of language in place, that sounds like that would be really helpful to have in that, but also just even your career. I see how a lot of miscommunication can be avoided and conflict can be worked through, or if you just have the correct language to do that. It sounds like that comes pretty naturally to you. Would you say that is the case, or is this something that you really had to work on? What do you think?
Oh, you're so perceptive. I love it. I'm so excited about this question. This is something I am naturally gifted at, but it took mentors and bosses to force almost. There's a part of my personality that is very about people pleasing, especially when I was younger in my career, and I would do anything my bosses, needed me to do. And I had a boss who, it was just a few of us, and I can be a chameleon, and this is a good and a bad thing, where I can kind of morph to be whatever that person in power kind of needs me to be in that moment. And she was doing these presentations and doing these trainings. This is how I got into it. And then she didn't have the time to do them anymore. And she said, I need you to do them. There was no one else to do them. And she was the one that put me in coaching training. And I hated it at first. I wanted to leave after the first day. And she pushed me. And she pushed because she saw something that was nascent that I had not developed and explored. But I was a comparative literature major. I'm obsessed with words and literature and how things are communicated and expressed. So I think you're right. I think it was a natural wiring, and then continually, it has to be continually refined. And I constantly find new ways to try to communicate. I had a situation, an amazing job that I had where I was working with mostly men, and that was very new. I'd worked with mostly women before, and that was a big challenge. That challenged me in communication a lot. I learned that I'd be talking and my boss would go blank. Like he would tune out like that. Right? I noticed that my emails, all these things were too long, too wordy, too verbose. So I learned to communicate in bullet points, because that was that entry point for that boss of mine, right? That's the way he needed to get information. So I was working with a lot of engineers, security architects, a lot of people who were Navy SEALs, or my boss was former Secret Service. And was in the Army before that. So just such I'll say alpha male kind of energy and way of communicating. I had to get very sarcastic. I cursed a lot more. I, communicated very, very succinctly, very directly. That's also my East Coast influence. And this job was on the East Coast. So it's very direct and a lot of cursing. So, I had to adapt to that environment and learn, how can I be impactful? How can I be listened to in this environment that I don't have that background? I quite simply don't. And that was humbling and still working on, I would say, some of that for sure.
Could you paint me the picture of the stakes at play when we talk about this sort of language and being able to do that? Because I see how the topic can be a little bit boring or stale if you say, let's talk about language today.
Right.
Can you paint me the stakes of that?
Wow. It's the highest stakes because language is one of the things it's one of the only things we have. So I'll tell you, one of the things that's going on now is a company that I'm consulting for and that I hope will hire me for a full-time role spoke to me about what the role is going to involve. And what the role involves is a lot of Spanish language. So now we're getting back into the cultural piece and kind of like literally, do you speak the right language, or, can you communicate? And in this company, a lot of the people that are in very high positions, it's a restaurant company. And so a lot of their executive chefs, a lot of their people who are cooks and are working in the kitchen and all that are Mexican, or Mexican American. And they have found that there is a gap as much as they try to train in English, and using different tools, it's still not as effective, and it's still not clicking, and it's still not landing in the way that they want it to because of the language. And so that's where I would come in, and I need to bone up on my Mexican Spanish, because I don't have a lot of that vocabulary, because it's my Spanish is more South American. But the stakes of not having the right language means that you don't feel, as an employee or an audience member, you're not included. This isn't for me. And I don't want to be here now because I'm not included. This is not for me. This person is not, the way she's talking already sets her apart. She's not someone I know. She's not someone that I can connect with. So those are the things that I'm learning how to be much more mindful of, understanding, who's in the room and who's that audience. And then I can, here's the chameleon part, right? I can kind of morph more into what is going to feel comfortable for like the majority of the people in the room.
Sounds like you're very adaptive.
I am, and it can be a negative. So there's a lot of positives in there. We could spend a lot of time talking about the positives, but then there's negatives for sure. There's then you kind of have to step away and say, well, how much performing do I want to be doing? What feels like a performance, and what feels like this is authentically who I am, and I'm just stepping it forward and bringing those parts of me forward that maybe don't get to be forward. Do I even want to think about it as performing? There's negative connotations to what that even is, what that sounds like when we think about ourselves, and we're all striving for more of that authenticity, I think, nowadays, right? So that's a big conversation in a lot of spheres in business and in creativity, right? So are you authentic to who you are? And can your audience tell? Your audience can tell. If you are trying to be something else that you just quite simply are not. It starts to fit you like an ill-fitting suit. And people kind of wonder, what's that about? And then they don't trust you. So the trust piece with any kind of creative endeavor, you need to have that trust with your audience. And then they have to start learning, well, this is what this person stands for. And as they get to know you, even in a 2-hour training, all those impressions are being gathered. Is like, well, what does this person who created this training kind of stand for, and who are they? So you can, it's a lot more complicated, or more, I don't know, more interesting than just creating a PowerPoint deck. So it's I like what I do. I really do.
Andrea, I grew up with MTV. I have fond memories of the shows that they put on past midnight, 2 a.m., like ridiculousness, like skater videos. Lots of fond memories of that. So I'd love to just dive into that part of your career. Can you tell me once again what exactly quick big picture overview, what kind of your day-to-day look like, and some of your most memorable experiences from that?
Right. So I was at MTV for 7 years, and it was my first job out of college. So, I mean, I don't know, there's no comparison to that. When I tell people that, they totally get, like, that was almost like my real college experience, because I went to a college that was almost like a boarding school. It was all women. The highlight of like the weekend would be going to an a cappella concert, so it was very tame. And then I go, and I'm from New York, and I go there, and I'm working in the middle of Times Square with all these other young people in an environment that was very liberal, I will say, and very, you can't do this stuff today, but I think there were substances going around. I think all kinds of things were going on, but I got to be in an environment where I worked for some very powerful women. who guided my career and who really allowed me to have opportunities that maybe other people wouldn't have had. So I started as an executive assistant. And what that means is you're really the gatekeeper for these people's lives, these incredibly creative, successful people. You're managing their calendar, you're getting to know their personal lives, and you're really their right hand woman in this case. And I got to go to amazing meetings and events and concerts and all these things kind of under this umbrella of like power that was not mine. I just was kind of part of it. And from that, I learned, gosh, I really want to be in the business world. I want to be in the corporate world. I went in there thinking I want to be a filmmaker and I want to make these programs. But I liked kind of what I saw on the corporate side. So that was a surprise to me. And I went through the ranks and got promoted kind of really on a regular basis. I think really because I had these advocates in my bosses. And I made a lot of relationships and had mentors. And that's where I started really learning how the importance of building these relationships, is. And I ended up working and getting promoted and being in a marketing role. So the kind of marketing that I did was called integrated marketing, which is where you are the middle person between sales and production. And I was doing things like continually traveling to shoots. So Miami, California, like just all over Texas. And kind of being the person that made sure let's say the Toyota Camry, let's just say that, let's say Toyota is the client. So making sure the Toyota Camry looks exactly the way we promised Toyota would look in our program, in our TV show that we're shooting. So I got to be around so many creative people and got to see how like entire sets were designed and like production design and the most seamless way that we were going to have the Toyota be, put into the program, for example. And that involves being part of writing scripts with production and making sure that you are an amazing project manager and you're getting all the approvals and you're getting everything that you need before the shoot date so that there aren't any surprises at the shoot. You're creating all these sales opportunities for sales to sell, because that's how we all get paid, is how much money, how much revenue we're going to make. And so it's a really dynamic and challenging role to be kind of in between very strong personality types. And you're learning how to mediate, and you're learning how to kind of build this bridge and making sure everyone feels like we're all in this together. We're all on the same team. Please, like, don't be divisive. We all have the same goals. So MTV was it was such a fun, creative atmosphere. As you can imagine, there's music and the TV's on everywhere you go. There's music playing or the TV's on, playing programs. The design of the building as well. I just remember the incredible art and set pieces and even the lighting kind of in the halls. Everything was very much about spurring that creativity and nurturing that creativity. So it did not look like your typical corporate space. And I think it spoiled me, because another thing about MTV was I was allowed to, and a lot of people were as well, not just me, not just play in your sandbox. You got to kind of explore and be doing different things depending on your talent and kind of what you could bring to the table. And when I went to NBC Universal, I worked for USA Network. So right after, it was a complete mismatch. It was so bad for me. It was not good because it was such a very corporate environment. Like even the wardrobe, like what I could wear at MTV compared to what I had to wear at NBC, like that already was a huge difference in just kind of dress, and how you express yourself, how you're allowed to express yourself corporately. That was a big difference. And I kind of realized I don't like this kind of corporate energy or kind of rules.
And MTV cast a pretty stark contrast.
Sure.
What was the hope of moving to NBC?
Well, it was my ego. So they contacted me.
Hmm.
And at that age, like that had never happened. Like
Hmm.
having an employer like reach out to you and be interested in you is like, it's like dating, you know? I was like, ooh, that's really appealing. And so I was like, what would it hurt to just go on the interview? And when I
Yeah.
went on the interview, there were two people on the team that were former MTV people.
Yeah.
So I had recognized them. I never worked with them, but I recognized them, and I thought, oh, if they're here, like it's probably good, and they were going to pay me more money, and all of that is very in like at a young age, and I'd only worked at MTV and things were changing there. My boss had left. There was talk about moving what we were doing to Miami, and I'm thinking I'm not moving to Miami.
Mm.
So the hope was that I was going to get this great experience and I was going to have amazing, mentorship, and I was going to have bosses that were going to continue kind of what I'd experienced at MTV. And unfortunately, that is just
Mm.
not how it went. And to this day, what's fascinating about that story is I started the job at the same time as two other new people.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them came from Nickelodeon, which is also in the Viacom family. So Viacom owns MTV and Nickelodeon.
Mm.
So she was coming from Nickelodeon and she hated it also. We both like hated it from the beginning. But she had the I'm gonna say balls. She had the balls, the cojones to quit after just being there like a week.
Wow.
And she actually took my old job because she was Hispanic, and I told her I
Yeah.
just left this job. Like you should go get that job.
Yeah.
Because I think my ego didn't allow me to quit and go back. Um, and I also felt like, well, I've like committed to this, so I now have to be here. And I shouldn't have, you know?
Mm.
I should have listened to like all that gut feeling that was like, this is not a good fit. Like, this is not going to be good. But I allowed something else to kind of override that and kind of go, we're just going to do this anyway because, we made this commitment. Um, and that was really important to me at that time for sure. Like we said we were going to do this. And I think that's also a very naive and kind of young person's perspective. I think now this generation is a bit different. I think if it didn't feel right, they'd bye. And most people would leave. So yeah, I think that was
Yeah.
a little bit more about that.
Yeah. I see how that would be a difficult choice. Because
Hmm.
on the one hand, it was only the second week.
Yeah.
And who knows where I see
Right.
how that could be seen as a challenge. This
Yeah.
is like challenging for me and
Hmm.
perseverance,
Right.
patience. You got it. It's only the second week.
Right.
So I see how that would be a challenging decision.
Yeah.
Do you, um, so with the creative freedom that you
Hmm.
got in MTV,
Yeah.
could you unpack the creativity for me?
Yeah. I got to be part of when we were launching MTV Tres. I got to be part of, I still remember this, like the way that we advertise to consumers is one thing, and then the
Mm-hmm.
way we're advertising to other businesses and kind of other people in kind of the trade or to advertisers is like another way. So
Yeah.
I got to be part of everything from picking out the colors and the design of our logo and be in those meetings with all of the on-air graphics, um, people who design how everything looked across all of our MTV family,
Mhm.
and that was incredible. I'm obsessed with colors and color palettes today, to this day, and understanding kind of everything from Latin heritage colors
Mm.
and palettes and how we wanted to combine that in even just the logo and how the graphics looked at the bottom of the screen. So I learned even that detail,
Mhm.
that attention to detail, to even coming up with names for our music blocks.
Mm.
There was a time that MTV played music videos. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, yeah.
But
MTV
so we
music,
also
yes.
did on MTV Tres playing music videos,
Wow.
and coming up with different, even the names of the programs. I was part of that, coming up with
Mhm.
what the names of our shows are going to be, and there were people that were not happy about that There is an executive I will not name. She's still very powerful. She actually did incredible stuff after she left MTV for another network, but now she's back there in a really high level position. But she did not like me. She did not like me. And I knew that from like the jump. And I remember her calling me one day and telling me, like, Lucia, our boss, listens to you and she really like cares about your opinion, basically saying, but like, don't have an opinion on this thing. I'm asking you to
Wow.
not have an opinion on this thing
Wow.
because I don't want your input, quite frankly. And I did not know how to handle an executive at a very high level speaking to me that way. And I was confused because I thought my role and my boss had given me that role of like,
Yeah.
I'm one of the people on her sounding board. I'm one of the
Yeah.
people, who she wants my input. So I think I didn't handle that very well. I don't think I
Yeah.
said what she wanted to hear. So she
Mm.
liked me even less after that.
That reminds me back of the importance of language.
Right. Yeah.
And look at
Yeah.
how would you today go about that?
Oh, wow. How would I handle that today? I think I would have the bravery to question her back and question in a very calm, respectful way, like kind of like, what makes you think that? What is it that you ideally would like from
Mm.
a communication with me or my input, in your ideal world? And then she was a very direct and frank person, and she could have said, well, I don't think you should have the right to have any input, you
Mm.
know um
Mhm.
and then
Mhm.
I would say, well, I think we could talk about this further with our boss if you want
Mhm.
to. But my understanding is that my role is to have input and is to contribute. So as long as she wants my contributions and they're valued, then I'm going to continue to have them. But I want us to have a really good relationship. So how can we you know work together and be on the same team so that we're all happy with the outcome? I think that's kind of more about how I would ideally like to this, if that happened today, how I
Yeah.
would go about having that conversation.
Drea, what are some of the most important skill sets that you think young people should start fostering
Mm,
regardless of job position?
yeah. I was thinking about this too. I was hoping you would ask about this, and it's about building those relationships. It's about relationship building and going out of your comfort zone and trying to connect with people who may not do exactly what you do. There may be an engineer or they're in IT or they're doing something different. And you building those relationships will save you in so many circumstances, and for you to then reciprocate and have those people's backs as well. So I've been able to do crazy requests that I've gotten from executives or last minute fire drills because I have those relationships and
Mm.
because I'm able to get people who will help me, who will stop their work and will help me with my work because I have supported them and done the same for them at another time, or they know that they can rely on me. So my second thing would be true to your word and have integrity. So your word is sometimes all you got. And if you start to mess with that and you start to show people around you that you actually cannot be counted on, the things that come out of your mouth don't really mean anything. Um, you are going to immediately change the nature of those relationships for the worse. You will create a reputation, and that will become known very quickly. And so, yeah, boiling it down to 2 bullet points. Number one is build those relationships, even if that's uncomfortable and it takes you out of your comfort zone. Build them with people outside of your team who do different jobs, who do different roles. And the second one would be have integrity and put your money where your mouth is, and always stand for what it is that you say that you're going to do.
Looking back,
Mm-hmm.
what are some of the ways that you have shot yourself in the foot in trying to do that?
Sometimes I can overpromise. So now we're going back to the people pleasing, and I can overpromise that something is going to get done or something is going to get completed. And in reality, I don't have when I have to look at all the competing projects, or I have to look at everything that I have to do, and it's like, oh, wait a second, I'm now like not going to get that done on time. And so it's having the courage to admit that and say to the person, this is what I can do. I want to apologize because I overpromised because I'm so enthusiastic about your project that I overpromised. And this isn't what I can get done by this time, but this is what I can get done at this time. And how does that work for you? And so having that, again, we're back to integrity, and having that ability to say, you know what, I'm going to be the first to admit my mistake and the first to kind of talk about my flaw in this way. So I've shot myself in the foot in that way where I've overpromised. And then sometimes I can be way off with like how to build a relationship with someone. And I can think that, oh, like this is the way I want to do it. And we're gonna have this kind of conversation, right? Kind of thinking about, I'm trying to control it too much. I'm trying to kind of control how I'm gonna build the relationship instead of letting it just kind of be more organic. And then the people surprise me and they're not who I thought they were. I thought I kind of had like a read or a sense. And then I'm wrong, and I'm off, and I'm just kind of like, ooh, I didn't go about that the right way. And that's come up sometimes in companies, and then a boss has to come tell me, I don't know if you and Linda, I don't know if you got off to the right start, And I'm like, yeah, shit, like I have to figure out how to fix that because it's not, I can tell that this is off. This is not clicking, you know?
Yeah. And if you look back in your career, is there anything that you wish you learned sooner?
Well, I wish I learned sooner what it was that I was like really good at and wanted to do, because I think I'd be further along in my career, and all the things that means, getting a higher salary, having a higher title, all those things. But then at the same time, I look back and there's nothing I've learned so much from like the different things that I've done. And it's all formed who I am and what I'm about. So I can't truly have that regret. My parents probably have that regret. But that's one thing that sometimes will still needle at me. And why does it needle at me? Because I'm comparing myself to other people. That's when that will come up, is when I'm playing that dangerous comparison game of where am I versus where this friend is, or that person is that I worked with all those years ago. Wow, like look at what they're doing, and then look what I'm doing, and gosh, wouldn't that be nice, right? So I'm very human in that way, of kind of having that unfortunate tendency to sometimes get in that comparison trap.
Do you have any last words to any young people who are very
Yeah.
early on in their career?
Yeah.
They just graduated college.
Absolutely. Yes. I think one of them is, let life surprise you because you don't know, and be open to opportunities that maybe you didn't think were the right things, because you never know what you're going to learn. And when those things happen, I would urge you not to look at it as a setback. I would urge you to look at it as just an opportunity to have to learn and then shift. Learn and then shift. and don't be afraid of not having that all figured out right now. You're just learning about yourself. You're just starting to learn about who you are and where you thrive and where you don't thrive. And go out and live those lessons. You're not going to get them any other way. I wish you could. I wish you could get them from reading a book, but you don't. You get them from being out in the world and seeing how you do and seeing how it all lands.